Welcome everyone. I'm Rosa Cabrera, Director of the Rafael Cintrón Ortiz Latino Cultural Center, known as the LCC. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for Zona Abierta. And we're also grateful to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and Earth and Environmental Sciences for supporting this program. The LCC Zona Abierta series highlights the intersection of the arts, humanities, science, culture, and civic life with presentation by local, national, and international artists, scholars, and community leaders about pressing social and environmental issues affecting the life of Latinx and Latin Americans while making connection to other communities, especially those in the Chicago area. This semester, the LCC is featuring the radical research from BIPOC scholars at UIC, and this is the last of 4 presentations. You can watch all the presentations in the LCC YouTube channel, which you can find it on our website if you go all the way to the end of the page. The presenters are scholars who joined the Bridge to Faculty program at UIC in the last 2 years. They have been sharing their experiences and respective research through an intersectional lens, revealing the complexities and particularity of their research and how the life of those in the margins are impacted. The Bridge to Faculty program, for those of you who are not familiar with this initiative, is a recruitment initiative in the Office of Diversity designed to attract underrepresented postdoctoral scholars with the goal of a direct transition to a tenure-track junior faculty position after 2 years of their hires. And today's presentation will be by Dr. Monique Holt from Earth and Environmental Science, and will focus on earthquakes caused by human activities. In particular, we will learn what the common causes are of human-induced earthquakes and their impact on people and the environment. I know I'm looking forward to this because I have a feeling I'm going to be learning a lot about this particular subject today. So I hope you all feel as excited as I am. The presentation will be about 35 to 40 minutes long, followed by a short conversation facilitated by LCC's Associate Director, Jorge Mena Robles. So we're inviting you to put comments and questions on the chat so that Jorge can direct this to our guest speaker at some point. Now I am thrilled to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Monique Holt. Dr. Holt is an observational seismologist who uses natural and anthropogenic seismic sources to listen to the earth. She completed her PhD in geophysics at the University of Utah in 2021. Her dissertation research was focused on seismically distinguishing between earthquakes and explosions recorded at close distances. This work contributed to the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty as capacity building for seismic discrimination. Prior to her PhD, she completed BS degrees in Applied Mathematics and Geophysics and an MS degree in Geophysics at Southern Methodist University. Dr. Holt is also interested in researching how to dismantle systematic barriers to diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion in STEM, and has participated in numerous committees dedicated to increasing the representation of marginalized groups in geosciences. When she's not working, Monique can be found baking, reading, or harvesting star fruit in Stardew Valley. Which, by the way, I had to look this up, Monique, and I found out that this is a video game, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. I was actually looking for where is Stardew Valley, and then realized that this is a video game. You can check Dr. Holt's full bio in the link that we at some point are going to be providing, I think it's already on the chat, is a much longer introduction about her work and background. So now, join me in welcoming Monique. Bienvenida to the LCC Zona Abierta. Take it away.
Thank you, Rosa. Let me share my screen. Okay, and then go to slideshow. All right, can everyone see my screen okay? Awesome. So today I am going to talk about the intersection of society and seismicity, and hopefully sort of, in honor of Earth Week, give y'all some things to think about as we move forward as in our society. So first, what is seismology? It's the study of waves that travel through the earth. It's a branch of geophysics. So geophysics is really just the study of the earth using sort of math and computers and things like that. And the subdiscipline of seismology is studying the earth with seismic waves. This is just the wave equation, which is pretty much the basis of everything that I do. So pretty much anything that touches the ground generates seismic waves. Ocean waves, landslides, lightning strikes, explosions, earthquakes, even humans. You can pick up on humans walking around on the ground. So it's really anything that causes any sort of ground motion, no matter how small. And they're recorded by seismometers. And these seismometers are generally made up of just a mass and a spring. And so as you have motion, the spring moves and we record it. So it's really, I want to say it's not complicated. It's a little bit complicated, but the fundamental idea is pretty simple. And so over here on the right, this is a picture of a seismometer, a more modern seismometer. You typically bury them really deeply in the ground. And it includes methods to both measure up and down motion and also side to side motion. So there are thousands of seismometers around the globe. So on this here, this is only showing the global seismic network, which is just one seismic network that's available to everybody. But if you were to choose, let's say, one of these stars, you could find maybe 300 seismometers within that one little star. So they're pretty much everywhere. And that's because there are earthquakes and other seismic sources all around the globe. So earthquakes, I think, are the most well-known type of seismic activity. And I think that's because they usually cause a lot of damage and they're pretty scary if you've ever felt one. It's sort of, if it's large enough, it sort of feels like being on a ship. And so the way earthquakes generate is movement along a fault. So you can think of faults as cracks in the ground. And an earthquake is when the crack moves. And so here, this is showing sort of what a fault is. And as you can see, this part moved down relative to this part. And so that is the remnant of an earthquake. Sort of that's what the earthquake looks like on the surface of the earth. And so the way we can measure the size of earthquakes is by something we call magnitude. So I think that a lot of people are familiar with magnitude. If there's a large magnitude, you say, oh, it's magnitude 8. And so this is just an illustration of magnitude. So we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's an idea that a magnitude 10 is not possible on the Earth. We're not sure of that yet, but it's a pretty commonly acceptable theory just because we don't have faults or cracks in the ground big enough to generate a magnitude 10. And I think the biggest, most important thing to get out of this is as you move up in magnitude, you're multiplying by 10. And so a magnitude 3 is 10 times larger than a magnitude 2. And so because of this, or this idea is that most earthquakes are actually very, very small. They're too small to feel. They might be picked up by seismometers, but they have to be really, really close to pick them up. Very few earthquakes are large. So I think a lot of us hear about these large earthquakes because they're in the news and they cause either damage or tsunamis or landslides, but they're actually quite rare in terms of how many earthquakes happen on the globe every day, all day. But, you know, really the idea is that humans just should not be generating earthquakes, first of all, and they should not be generating what we call felt earthquakes, which is just the idea that you can feel an earthquake. And this is just showing different sort of building heights have different motion related to earthquake shaking. The taller your building, the more you're going to sway, but you want to sway because the swaying prevents the breaking. And so what I'm talking about today is induced seismicity. So these are earthquakes that are caused by humans. So induced means humans caused the earthquakes. And I'm going to be talking about more than earthquakes. I'm going to be talking about really anything that generates a seismic wave, which, as I was showing a few slides ago, it's lightning strikes and so on and so forth. And so the first thing I'm going to talk about, my computer froze. Can y'all see the screen? Let's see. There we go. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is how humans induce seismicity with explosions. So explosions, because they are touching the ground, they leave a seismic trace, they cause ground motion, and they're picked up by seismometers. So this is a picture of the first ever nuclear test. It's in 1945. It was detonated in New Mexico, and this is what I think is really cool. It's an actual picture of that test. And so the field of seismology really grew because of the Manhattan Project. And this was because over in Europe, they had come up with nuclear technology, and Albert Einstein wrote to the president and he said, I'm really concerned about this technology. It has the potential to create really destructive weapons. We need to start investing in this. And so the Manhattan Project was the first large-scale scientific study of sort of these policy, governmental sort of issues. And now it's more used because of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. So this treaty bans all nuclear weapons testing all over the globe. And so this picture shows the actual treaty signed by Bill Clinton. And the reason why seismology is so helpful for this, again, my screen is freezing. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Okay. The reason seismology is so helpful for this is because it could tell you what the event is. Was it an earthquake or an explosion? Where was the event? Was it in, say, North Korea? And how big was it? Was it a magnitude 2 or was it a magnitude 6? And so just to give you an idea, this is the seismogram of an explosion here and an earthquake here. And so you can, tell the difference pretty easily looking at these, that they're different, but it's actually a really difficult problem. And it's really cool because seismometers were actually the first to record a tunnel collapse from the 2017 North Korea nuclear explosion. It turns out it's pretty difficult to get your hands on the seismic data for that tunnel collapse. So here I'm just showing these seismograms for each of these tests. And I think the important thing really here is that they've just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And this 2017 was the largest test. But these are not the only explosions that exist on the Earth. Seismometers also recorded the Beirut explosion. And so that was really interesting. And these are the seismograms here, and you can see sort of how they move away with distance. So this is distance from the explosion. And there are also explosions that are controlled, highly controlled, with quarry blasts. And you can usually tell it's a quarry blast explosion because it's what we call ripple fire or delayed fire. And so what they do is they detonate first this little column, then this column, and this column, and they're detonated within, let's say, 10 milliseconds of each other, but it really shows up in a seismogram. And so there's a lot of things that my research really needs to take into consideration and issues that we're addressing. And first, it's who's making these policy decisions. So scientific studies have shown that science is stronger when you have diversity, because you have different perspectives, different ideas of how to go about things. And historically, that has not been the case in the United States, as is shown here with Kennedy signing one of the nuclear treaties from 1963. And it hasn't much changed in terms of the people who are making these scientific decisions and reports to the government. And so we're really trying to, as a field, recruit more diverse people from different backgrounds so that we can make better policy decisions. The second thing we're wondering is, what are these explosions doing to the environment? And so this is actually one of the reasons why in 1963, nuclear testing was limited to only being underground. And this incident actually happened after that. So this is called the Bainbury incident. And what happened was they detonated a nuclear explosion underground within a tunnel, but the tunnel didn't collapse the way that it was supposed to. And so it just released all of this radioactivity into the air when it wasn't supposed to. And this was in, I believe it was in Nevada. And what happened is this radioactive air, it traveled all the way to Utah. It caused farmers to get very sick, their livestock to get very sick. And this actually sparked the public anger towards nuclear testing, and is sort of what led to the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. And the last issue is sort of who owns the data of these events that we're studying. So this is a picture of LaGrange. And there is a quarry at LaGrange who that's detonating explosions. And the people can feel these explosions. They can feel their house shaking. And so what the mining company did was they put a seismometer in someone's backyard, but they haven't released the data. And it was only when that person said, I want you to remove this from my backyard, did they give them data. And that person sent the data over to UIC, and you can't do anything with this data at all. There's no analysis that you can do. And so it really brings up these questions of is it ethical? And honestly, it's not, to use other people's private lands for your own scientific gain and not share that with them. And this also comes up a lot in terms of partnerships with Native peoples as well. So, now I'm going to switch gears into talking about human induced seismicity with energy production and with the energy companies, which I think is what most people have heard of in the news. And so this is things like oil and gas. So to keep with this mining theme for a little bit, mining activity can lead to mine collapses. And these mine collapses, they create seismic signals, and we can see them on seismometers. And what we do is we analyze this to say, okay, well, how can we do better next time, right? How do we avoid this collapse? What happened during this collapse? And this is actually a little bit of a happy story. So mining activity can cause landslides. You're moving a lot of rock whenever you're exploding it. And sometimes that rock becomes so unstable that it just slides. So this is a picture of the Bingham Canyon mine in Utah. It is the largest copper mine in the world. And it had a really large landslide, but the sort of positive spin on this is that they had been monitoring it with seismometers. They realized that the land was becoming unstable, and so they had evacuated it before it failed. And so this is one of those cases where seismology really helped save lives. And so nobody was injured or killed during this event. And now we're getting to these energy companies. So one of the things that I think a lot of people think induce earthquakes is hydraulic fracturing. So this is the sort of official term for fracking. But the thing is fracking intentionally causes earthquakes. So if you look here, this is a well, they drill down and then they drill horizontally. And they are setting off explosions on purpose because they are trying to crack the rock to get the, let's say, the gas out. And so, this actually does not cause very large earthquakes. They are intentional and they are very small. Occasionally it's caused maybe a larger one than they planned, but typically not that large. Most of the large earthquakes have been caused by wastewater injection. And this is unintentional. This is not supposed to cause earthquakes. So what happens is when you frack that rock and you get, your resource coming out of it, what also comes out is a whole bunch of gross, salty water. And this water is hazardous. So you can't just put it in a lake or in the ocean. And so what they do is they inject it back into the ground. But injecting it back into the ground makes these cracks in the earth really slippery, and then they slide, and then we have induced earthquakes. And these induced earthquakes from wastewater injection are the largest induced earthquakes that happen pretty much around the globe. And so it was wastewater injection that actually led to the 2016 Pawnee earthquake in Oklahoma. It was magnitude 5.8, and to date, it is the largest earthquake that has been induced by wastewater injection. So, there's a few things we need to think about when we're thinking about events that have been caused by the energy industry. And one is sort of, how do you keep your workers safe, right? Especially in these mines. We try to instrument all the mines with a whole bunch of seismometers, but the science is a little bit imperfect. It helped with the Bingham Canyon mine collapse, but it also, landslide, but it also has failed in other areas. And one of the biggest challenges here is actually getting industry to work with scientists. They tend to like to keep their data to themselves. It's proprietary and they don't want it essentially shared with other competitors. And so it's really difficult to form these collaborations where the scientists can say, oh, well, you probably want to be looking for this. Thankfully in Utah, which is where I did my PhD, this isn't much of a problem at all. We had a very strong geophysics program, and we also had a very strong mining engineering program. Another consideration is who is most vulnerable to these earthquakes. It's the sort of less, these sort of less structurally sound dwellings that are going to be more vulnerable, right? This is mobile homes and things of that nature. And yet, oftentimes the people who live here are also, the ones who can't necessarily just fix it, right? And the energy companies are they're they don't want to pay for it, right? They say, oh, well, it's not our fault, this and this and that. And so this has really become a problem. And relatedly is this idea of earthquake insurance. You expect to need earthquake insurance in California because they have a lot of natural earthquakes, but you don't really expect to need earthquake insurance in, let's say, Oklahoma, where there are induced earthquakes. And so it's this question of, well, how much is earthquake insurance? How widely available should it be? Do I really need it? And again, this is very expensive, and it affects the poorer socioeconomic communities a lot more. And so, yeah, this is something that we're really trying to tease out as scientists, is sort of how do we make a more equitable distribution of our resources. And lastly, how do cities plan for these earthquakes? So I'm from Dallas. This is a picture of a major interchange in Dallas. And there have been induced earthquakes in Dallas. They were induced by wastewater injection. And one of the concerns was that these highways sit on top of these pillars, and they're not bolted down or anything. The idea is that they're heavy enough to just sit on top of the pillars, and that's fine, and nothing will ever happen to them. Except when there started to be earthquakes in the city, all of a sudden the city planners and the city governments are saying, well, okay, if we're going to get a 5.8 in the same way that Oklahoma did, what do we do with these highways? That causes major destruction, millions and millions of dollars of damage. And it's the work of the scientists along with the legislators to come up with these contingency plans of, okay, if an earthquake of this size happens, what happens here? If an earthquake of this size happens, what happens here? And I highlight this example because it really scared me during my master's when the city of Dallas was talking about this of, okay, what if this highway just slides right off this pillar? Because they weren't built to withstand earthquakes, because there are not supposed to be earthquakes in Dallas, Texas. And lastly, I'm going to give a consideration that I don't think a lot of people have thought of. So, when we think of induced earthquakes and we think of these oil and gas companies, we think, oh, this is bad for the environment, they are villains in this, we need to be switching to renewables, they're causing all this problem. But there are certain problems of the future that may also induce earthquakes that we need to sort of figure out how to deal with. So the first is geothermal energy. Geothermal energy is the idea that you drill really, really deep into hot rock, and you take out all of the hot water, you generate energy, but then you have to inject it back into the ground so that you never run out of water to put in this sort of hot reservoir. And in some cases, people are doing are creating enhanced geothermal systems. And so what that means is they're drilling down into that rock and they're exploding it, similar to fracking. And again, like, these are bringing up a ton of questions of, okay, well, yes, this is a green source of energy, but are we going to induce earthquakes with this? And so this is a picture of Forge. This is a multi-million-dollar project with the Department of Energy. It's out in the desert of Utah, and it is studying just this. It's studying what happens when you have an enhanced geothermal system, and it's been instrumented with seismometers to see, okay, well, how much can you inject in the ground before you start inducing earthquakes, and is there a way to not induce earthquakes? So this just got started a few years ago, so it'll probably be several more years before we see the results of this. Another project that I just recently got involved in that I really love is this idea of renewable drinkable water. So in the Chesapeake Bay of Virginia, they are running out of water in their aquifer, and that's where they get all of their drinking water. And this is causing really, really big problems. And so what they're trying to do is create a sort of closed system of getting water so that essentially they never run out of water. And so they they basically treat the wastewater, and then they want to inject it back into the aquifer and then keep this cycle going. And this is really a problem for the future as more and more areas with climate change run out of fresh water. But the issue is this injection back into the ground, the same way, you know, of wastewater injection, the same way as geothermal injection. And so this project, again, it's in Chesapeake Bay, Virginia, and the whole idea is they're drilling wells and they're going to, and they've instrumented the area with seismometers, and they're trying to measure, okay, well, how much can we inject before we start causing earthquakes? And these wells, they want to have 5 wells, and they want to inject 100 million gallons per day forever. So this is a really large scale project that's honestly really important for the future, and it will become increasingly important. So I just got involved in this about 6 months ago. They just put in the seismometers in December. So this is still, again, very new. They don't expect these wells to start injecting for another 5-ish years or so. But again, this is a really important problem of the future. And so when we look into the future, I think a lot of us think, you know, with climate change and everything, that and there's been an increase in natural disasters, right? More tornadoes, more hurricanes, more fires, etc. But actually, none of this will affect natural earthquakes. And that's because, you know, everything that we're doing and everything that as humans we're affecting is really at the surface here. It has to do with the atmosphere. We are not going to change plate tectonics. We cannot change plate tectonics, and we cannot change how the earth moves naturally. So in a sense, it's kind of comforting that, you know, we are not going to cause an increase in earthquakes or anything like that. But what we do need to be concerned about are induced earthquakes, right? We can cause, you know, we can't cause these magnitude 8s, but we can cause these magnitude 5s. And I think that, you know, it's really important because it tests our human resiliency. And we need to be able to rebuild after these events that we are causing ourselves. And so, you know, I'm ending with this picture of Venus, Texas. This is the city I did my master's degree on. And they had a magnitude 4.0 in Texas where there shouldn't be, and it caused damage when it shouldn't cause damage because it's not built for earthquakes. And so, again, just reiterating that we need to start paying attention to this a lot more, and legislators, especially in states like Texas, need to be on board, and they need to be regulating the energy companies. So that's it. That's all I have.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Holt, for your presentation and for sharing your research with us so that we could all engage with seismology and the impact it has on society. I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that I have learned so much today. We already have a couple of questions for you already, but I want to invite anyone who has a comment or a question to continue to post them or send them to me directly.
Should I unshare my screen?
I think it's okay to leave it in this slide.
Okay.
In the chat, we're already seeing folks shared just, wow, what a presentation, fascinating stuff. To kick things off, one of the considerations that you introduced is who is making policy decisions on earthquakes and seismic waves. And you mentioned the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which is a global decision to ban nuclear weapon test explosions. Because it is Earth Month and because of some of where you ended, could you share maybe what we can learn from this sort of global decision, this treaty, as we face the dire impacts of climate change on our environment across the globe?
Yeah, so I think an important thing to note is that this treaty actually hasn't gone into enforcement. So what that means is we can't enforce it by international law. And the reason is because there are certain countries that have not signed or ratified the treaty. And the US is one of them. We haven't ratified the treaty. So in that sense, I would say we haven't, we're not quite to the place where we have learned our lesson about nuclear weapons, and we can't really stop these other countries from detonating nuclear weapons on the surface. One of the reasons that the US cited for not ratifying the treaty is because they don't believe that seismology can tell the difference between earthquakes and explosions well enough. And you know, that sort of doesn't rule out surface explosions, which are a lot more dangerous. And so, yeah, this is a really complicated, nuanced issue. And yeah, they need maybe more different people making these decisions to consider these nuances.
Thank you for that. Another sort of local incident that I want to see if if it's in your radar, if you have some comments on it. Back in April of 2020, during the pandemic, there was an implosion of a power plant smokestack in Little Village, which is a primarily working class Mexican community. And residents were not notified that this was happening. And so they were covered in sort of this dust cloud that had reverberating effects. Well, first, if you know about this incident, could you maybe talk about how this connects to some of the considerations that you've brought up around who makes policy decisions, who owns the data, some of the available resources for residents of these types of incidents?
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with the incident, so I wish I could go into detail about that. But this incident sounds like it's getting into environmental justice, which is sort of a separate field in geoscience. But it's this idea that we as scientists really need to be advocating for these communities that are feeling it, because it seems that not many lawmakers are. And so we've sort of, as geoscientists, we've sort of taken that on as our role. But it's still, scientists don't have a lot of power. And so there are still issues there. And I wish I could say that was uncommon around the world, but it's just not. And that's actually a study I talked about doing with somebody just last week, actually.
Thank you for that. I'm sure folks will respond to what you just said. Scientists may not have a lot of power. I think something for us to continue to engaging with, right? I think more recently we've seen scientists really take up the climate justice fight in not just the academic spaces, but also in the advocacy spaces as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Another question we have here is, since it is unlikely that people will stop digging or drilling into the earth anytime soon, how do you think we can better prepare to deal with earthquake disasters caused by human activities?
That's an excellent question. I think, first of all, call your lawmakers, because they're actually the ones who are controlling the regulations of these companies. It's not the companies are going to operate with whatever freedom they're given. Another thing is, in the same vein as, hurricanes and tornadoes, have a disaster kit. Likely an induced earthquake is not going to be on the level of a magnitude 8. So, you don't really need to prepare necessarily for an apocalypse unless you live in Japan or another area that naturally has large earthquakes. But yeah, just be prepared for it. Make sure, if you do live in an area with known induced seismicity, or even if you're not sure, first of all, contact either your local seismologist, geophysics department, there's one in every state, and see if there are induced earthquakes. But also, if there are, make sure that you don't have many things on open shelves. Make sure that if you have unreinforced masonry, which is actually very common, so this is just sticking bricks on the side of buildings without any sort of attachment, make sure that during an earthquake, you're not going outside and you're not standing near these buildings. The best thing to do in an earthquake is duck, cover, and hold. Similar to a tornado, get under something and just wait for it to pass, because if anything falls, you want to make sure that you're protected from that debris.
Thanks, Mo. In relation to the policy conversation, someone wrote, you mentioned research needs to consider who is making policy decisions. What type of policy would you like to see or encourage folks to push for?
I would like the US to ratify the treaty. I would like the US to enter the treaty. And I would like to, and this is more of an implicit policy, I would like to be on the panel that advises the government, which has historically never had a woman or person of color on it in its 50-year history. So I would just like to break barriers. I wish I had a high enough security clearance to get in more detail than that. But yeah, that's my goal.
Thanks for that. Another question we have here to shift gears a little bit. How does your personal experience as a woman of color in STEM impact the way you practice, you teach, or conduct research in your field? And is the field changing or evolving for more diverse perspectives or ways of thinking?
Yeah, the field is evolving significantly. So the way that it's impacted me is honestly getting into DEI. I was never interested. I didn't really, it was peripherally there, but I had never thought about it. And moving to Utah and being in geosciences, which is already not very diverse, I really became vocal about it to make these spaces safe for me. And so I would say that sort of advocacy has really changed my science in the sense of, I'm more open to ideas that sound radical. In my mentorship, I really make sure to understand my mentees, and I've had a couple of interesting mentees, right? But I would say that my awareness of these DEI issues has really helped foster those relationships. And in geoscience in general, there's a paper that came out a few years ago that said there's been no progress in geoscience in 40 years. And it's true. They did all this analysis. There has not been any progress in race or ethnicity in geoscience in 40 years, and only for the last 40 years, because that's all we have data for. So there's been a really large push in the geosciences to create more diverse spaces, but it involves tackling a lot of misconceptions, like, do I always have to go into Missouri to do field work? Because I don't want to go to Missouri to do field work, and just these little things like that. So yeah, I would say that there's been a large movement, but there's still a long way to go.
Thanks for sharing that, Mo. I think in relation, folks are wondering how you, I don't want to say fell into the field, but how you sort of landed in this space. So if you're okay, maybe could you share with us a little bit more of that context?
Yeah, so I sort of changed my major 4 times in undergrad. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I probably went to undergrad too early. I fell into geophysics because I really liked geology, but I hate rocks. I don't find them interesting at all. So I went to my advisor and I said, I really like this volcanoes and learning about Pompeii, but I don't want to look at this rock. I don't. So they said, well, there's geophysics. It's more mathy. I was like, oh, perfect. And then there was an earthquake in Dallas. And one of the professors emailed and said, I need someone to help me study this. I just said yes because I needed a job. It was my 4th job of that semester and I really needed it. And then I loved it and I just kind of stayed in it. So yeah, it was a really non-linear path. And a lot of the times geosciences are called the discovery major because almost nobody goes into undergrad thinking they want to be a geoscientist.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that. One of the students took a look at your website and they noted that you included an intro to podcasting course on there. And so they're curious, how have you used or what role do you see digital humanities such as podcasting playing in the interpretation of human-driven earthquakes or in your field?
Yeah, so I'm actually really big into science communication. I think ineffective science communication is the reason there is such a large distrust by the public in science. I think largely, some scientists just can't communicate their work effectively, if they're, let's say, on the news or something. And also, scientists communicate to, let's say, the government. So let's say you say, oh, climate change is happening because of this, this, and this. And the government, turns around to the people and says, climate change is just hotter temperatures, right? And there's so much more that goes into that. And, people don't understand the peer review process and how difficult it is to actually put your ideas out there and how much other scientists try to tear them down. That's sort of the whole point of publishing. And so I think podcasting, I think YouTube, I think any sort of media, that Twitter that's accessible to the general public is a great tool for just communicating science in an effective way so that people understand, oh, this is why I should take this vaccine. Oh, these oil and gas companies really do cause earthquakes, something like that. And I think, I'm just a huge proponent of science communication.
One of the, any Twitter, YouTube podcast recommendations while we're on the topic?
Twitter, there's someone named Wendy Bohan, Bohon. Her videos, so essentially anytime there's a large earthquake, she just goes on and she explains it like, this is what's happening, this is the seismogram, this is what we're looking at. And I really like the stuff she does. I would say it's not exciting, it's not meant for entertainment, but it is clear communication. And that's one I love to follow.
I may have missed one of the comments in the chat, but I'll read it in case there's something you would like to respond to. It says, so was there really nothing of value from the data given by the Lockport Quarry Company? I live in the next town over.
There was really nothing of value. And it made me very upset because they sent it to this person saying, here's the data that you asked for. This person sends it to me and I'm like, I can't even do anything with this. I can't even locate where these events are. I can't even look at the data. It's, nothing of value.
Awesome. A couple of quick, maybe more fun questions, although I think all these questions are fun. What Stardew Valley activity would likely cause human-induced earthquakes?
The setting off the bombs in the mines.
There you go. And then someone asked, your bio included reading. What does a geoscientist read for fun?
Oh gosh, I really love fiction books. I haven't read in quite a while, but I like sci-fi, like N.K. Jemisin. I can't remember how to say her name. I don't really read a lot of, smart people books. It's not really my jam. I like to read fiction, interesting stories.
I'll read one final question and feel free to add any final comments maybe we didn't get to. How do you think that geoscientists and social scientists could collaborate to document and manage the harmful effects of induced earthquakes, especially as we see the potential for more renewable drinkable water projects?
Yeah, so this is actually a really big one. So I work with someone who very much straddles this social science, geoscience border. So I think one of the things that people are working on right now is, first of all, developing better relations with Native peoples on Native lands, because we really need instrumentation out in Oklahoma, out in Kansas, to really monitor these events. But we need to be sharing that data as well. And we need to be, including these people in the science, in the studies, in the understanding of what we're learning. Another way is we're sort of looking at, we analyze earthquakes in terms of like who felt them. But what we're looking at is, well, people in sort of, underprivileged areas are not reporting feeling earthquakes because, maybe there's not that message getting sent to the public on how to do it. And so they're really, I think, these people are lacking a lot of knowledge of sort of where this earthquake happened, how much ground shaking there is, how worried to be. And so that's really, I think, really important. And I would just want to say that you fill out a USGS felt report if you feel an earthquake. If you just Google USGS, did you feel it? And just fill out the form. It's easy as pie, and it really helps scientists.
All righty. Well, to be mindful of time, we'll leave it there. Thank you again, Dr. Monique Holt, for sharing your research with us. You've given us plenty to continue thinking about after this event.